make this work.
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I have Ryan Kilpatrick here, and I will let him introduce himself and his company in just a minute, but we are here to talk about the new dashboards that Ryan and his team put together. So, Ryan, maybe a little introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Yarrow. I'm Ryan Kilpatrick with Flywheel Community Development Services. Really excited to be serving Housing North and participating as the Housing Ready Support Service for Leelanau and Benzie counties this year.
So Ryan and I are going to just have a conversation about the dashboards. We realize we put them out there into the world, and we might want to give a little bit of context. So I think my first question for you, Ryan, is what is the biggest takeaway from the regional dashboards, and then how could somebody kind of use this on a county by county basis?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do is consolidate a lot of the information that Housing North has been collecting over the last couple of years and put it in one easy to find, easy to read location. The housing needs assessment that was completed a year ago or so contains a ton of information. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages long, which is amazing for folks who have time to sift through and dig into all of that data. And we highly encourage anybody who's interested to dig into those housing needs assessment reports. But what we wanted to do is give a really high level overview of some of those key data points that are going to be really important to keep track of over time, so that each particular community across the Housing North territory in Northwest Michigan can keep track of their data, can understand, are we on a positive trajectory or a negative trajectory, and what are those key indicators? So the big one I think that's really important to be paying attention to right now is this rental vacancy rate. And even for folks who really want to prioritize homeownership in the community, the rental vacancy rate is a critical number to be paying attention to. And the reason for that is when we don't have enough rental housing availability, it cascades across the rest of the housing market. And often what happens is when we don't have enough homeownership opportunities, people have to rent for longer, and higher income households end up getting stuck renting for longer. And they're then competing with middle income and lower income households. And it just cascades throughout the whole market. So a healthy vacancy rate, as you can see here, is going to be closer to 5 to 8%. And at last check, this rental vacancy rate was below 1%. So part of the near-term solution is really getting that rental vacancy rate to come up a little bit, because that's what gives people the ability to have some flexibility and some choice in the housing market so that they can move from one location to another or take the next step up in their housing journey. We have to have rental units available in order for that to be possible.
Awesome. So Ryan, I see three numbers on here, and I think, the big one obviously is our total need for the region. The other one I think has to do with the permits that are pulled. So will we see these numbers sort of change over time as more permits are pulled, or sorry, excuse me, or how will we be tracking these? And then these dashes down here, what will be filled in there?
Yeah, so up here we've got the total new homes needed by 2027. This is the gap estimate that Bowen National Research projects for the entire territory. So everybody in this map is included in this 31,268 number. And so Bowen projects based on population growth and household growth, as well as commuter data, and an evaluation of the number of older homes that likely aren't going to make it through the next 5 years because they haven't been well maintained. That's both the replacement rate of those old homes as well as all of the new housing units that are going to be needed to accommodate growth. This is your big number. This is the big goal to try to achieve. This number, the 913 number, is the actual number of new housing permits that were pulled in the previous year. And so we're going to keep tracking this number year over year. Preferably, we're going to try to update this on a quarterly basis to the extent that we can get those numbers from our local municipalities. And then these two numbers represent the number of new income restricted units, meaning a unit that is set aside for a household based on their income. We don't have any of those recorded yet for the previous year, but we do have some approvals and some permits that are being pulled. And so we think that we'll have some new units built over the next year that we can start to document. And then this one is the local zoning changes. And this is where our Housing Ready staff comes in from across the region. They're going to be working closely with each individual local municipality. And as local zoning updates are made, we're going to track those and we'll plug them in here. But really quickly, what I want to show you is we're also monitoring the median income. So this has been going up pretty steadily over the last few years. And then we're comparing median income to median rent and what's actually affordable to that median income household. So right now, median rent is affordable to a household that earns a little over 90% of the median income. And we want to see that come down, right? We want to see this median rent affordable to households earning below 80% median income if possible. And so our rent gap right now, the number of units we need for 4 rent households is almost 9,000. And then this is our for sale gap, right? So we're looking at, this is the average home price across the whole region. And this is the income that's necessary to afford it, assuming that we're not going to let anybody spend more than 30% of their income on home ownership. It's super hard to get a mortgage, by the way, if you're trying to spend more than 30% of your income on housing. And then this is our gap. We need 22,000 additional housing units that are for sale in order to satisfy all that demand. And as I mentioned earlier with the rental vacancy rate, if we continue to fall behind on this for sale gap, if this gap grows or if we just can't quite keep up, then the first thing that happens is all those people who want to be homeowners and can't quite break into homeownership, they're going to add to this rental gap, right? So this gap is going to continue to grow. And then over time, they're going to start to push our low and moderate income households out of the market. And those are the folks that we really need in our communities who are working in our retail and service establishments. They're working in healthcare, they're cleaning, they're construction. The folks that really help our communities run are many of the folks who are being priced out of the market entirely.
Awesome. So I just want to get in the weeds on the data a little bit because it is confusing. You hear a lot of AMI numbers thrown around. So when we look at that 63,000, is that for a single household or two-person household?
Yeah, great question. So the 63,000 is for a single adult household. And one of the things that we really wanted to look at across the region was what are the average household sizes? And so depending on the county, it typically ranges from about 2.3 individuals per household on average, up to about 2.7 individuals per household on average. A more recent trend is that we have a lot of single adult households or couples without kids. And so rather than, it used to be the standard was you just think about a 4-person household, right? And often that was mom, dad, and 2 kids. But now mom, dad, and 2 kid kinds of households are less than a third of the overall marketplace. And so what we really want to zero in on is an individual who's trying to move into the region or trying to make it in the region as is, what they can afford and what rent looks like. And over time, what we can also do is compare, okay, how does that look compared to a 2-person household or a 3 or 4-person household? And we can begin to link to more of those data sources so that if anybody's interested and you want to kind of dive into the numbers a little more deeply, you can click through to the next layer and see what is the impact for a 2 or 3 or 4-person household.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Maybe we could pick a county and just kind of show how it does change, per county.
Yeah, so for anybody who logs on to housingnorth.org, if you go up to the data section and click through into the dashboards, you'll see down here at the bottom, you can click through these slides and see every single county if you want to. And so just to focus on Benzie County here for a second, here we're seeing an even lower vacancy rate than we saw for the region as a whole. They're less than 0.5% vacant. The new homes needed, according to the Bowen National Research gap estimates, 508 or 1,508 in total, and produced about 123 units last year, right? So we're producing a little less than 10% of the units that are needed year over year. City of Frankfurt actually just had a pretty big zoning update last year. So we're going to update this. We're going to add at least one, and then also make sure that we're tracking every one of the other local communities who have made zoning changes in the last year and continue to tally those here. So you'll see those show up. Also in the city of Frankfurt, we've got some new workforce housing that's coming online. It's under construction right now, just outside of the downtown. Those units will show up here in the not too distant future as those come online. And then the second page for Benzie County, you can see their median income is a little bit higher than the median for the region as a whole. Remember, a single adult in the region was $63,000 a year. In Benzie, a single adult is $66,000. The rental housing that does exist is actually relatively affordable in Benzie County. There's just not really any of it available. And so here, the rental housing that is available, that does exist, is relatively affordable compared to the rest of the region. But we've got a pretty big gap. Another 200 units are needed to satisfy the number of households who are trying to move into the county or move out of their parents' home or their friends' homes. Median home price here you can see is $354,000. The income necessary to afford that, again, assuming a 30-year mortgage with 5 to 10% down and the current 7% interest rate, you need to earn $118,000 to afford that median home price. And our for sale gap in Benzie County is almost 1,300 units. So a lot of units need to come online in Benzie County, and we've got to work in partnership with our local communities to figure out where will those best fit, where do we have infrastructure to support them, and where do we have communities that are ready to accept those new housing units.
Awesome. And maybe we could just look at Grand Traverse County, because that is where the biggest need is. And then I think maybe just share a little bit about the sources of data. So Bowen definitely used his own sources of data for the report, but then there's other places you are pulling or looking at your data. So maybe just put some context there for people who are data curious and where the source.
Great. So this initial rental vacancy number comes from the Bowen National Research gap estimates, and their data source was a phone survey. They called property managers across every single one of these counties. Any property that had 5 or more units, they were surveying and asking for the vacancy rate. On an ongoing basis, we're going to be using CoStar Market Analytics so that on a monthly basis, we can check to see how this vacancy rate changes. Now, the important caveat for either CoStar or Bowen and most of the data that's available is we're really limited to knowing the vacancy rate primarily to housing types that are 5 or more units. It's very difficult to get a handle on just mom and pop single family homes that are for rent or a 2-family that's owned by a mom and pop landlord. It's hard to track down all of those property owners and survey them every single month. It's much easier to track down kind of an apartment building and understand, all right, there's 25 units in this apartment building. We can get the vacancy rate in one phone call. So know that there's a little bit of a limitation in terms of overall data quality as it relates to all of the available housing in the county. There may be, or there very likely are going to be some units that might be vacant that we're missing in this vacancy rate. But that means that we're also missing a bunch of units that are occupied. And so over time, this is a national issue, right? Nationally, it's hard to track vacancy rates for those 1 to 4 unit buildings that are owned by mom and pop landlords. But there are several firms that are working on solutions to that. And so we hope over the next year or two, companies like Atom Data Analytics are beginning to make some investments to try to figure out how to solve for that gap. As you mentioned, Yarrow, the housing gap is most significant in Grand Traverse County. You can see they need 11,361 more units. And they had permits for about 538 last year, and that's for new housing units. It does not include renovations or additions or those kinds of things. So this number is about 5%, maybe a little bit less than 5% of the total unit production that we need year over year. And so we really got to be working with the county and each individual local municipality to figure out how do we boost housing production in the places where it makes the most sense. And then again, we'll be updating these numbers with our housing ready staff to make sure that we're adding in the local zoning changes that have occurred and the income restricted units that have been built. And lastly, you can see Grand Traverse County actually has a higher median income than the region as a whole. It's also higher than Benzie County that we just looked at. In terms of available units for rent, their rental product is a little bit more affordable than the region as a whole, but their vacancy rate is so low, it almost doesn't matter. You're lucky if you've got a unit today, but if you're trying to break into a new unit, it's very difficult. And then the median home price is higher than the region as a whole, 378,000. Now we're talking about $126,000 family or household income to afford that. And you can see here, here's how our unit gap estimate breakdown looks. 3,500 units needed for rent, and 7,800 units roughly needed for sale. So the one last thing I'll say about our data, so we're getting these from the Northern Great Lakes Realtors, their MLS system. That's how we're tracking median home price and median sale price. And then we're doing the math on the income required to afford that based on a 30-year mortgage and the most current interest rate. So as interest rates come down, we hope, we'll start to see the income required to afford that median home also come down. Also, hopefully, as production goes up, we'll start to see the median home sale price slowly decline or at least not grow as much. But the other thing that we're going to be doing in the future is we've reserved this blank space on the dashboard because what we want to do going forward is show you, is this increasing or decreasing? And is it increasing by a lot or by a little? So we'll show you the percentage increase or decrease over time. And same for this number, right? We might have this tick up a little bit, but if interest rates come down a full point, this number might come down a little bit. And we'll be able to talk about how that works in the marketplace.
Awesome. This is really helpful, Ryan. I think the other thing I would just add is those of you who are involved in our, regional housing plan and partnership, we will be adding probably a few region-wide goals that relate back to this dashboard. This was really focused on our housing needs assessment, but we have some clear goals and things that we can track that are outside of this that we'll put on there in the future. And then also just, encourage you to reach out if you have questions about this or want to know how to use this information. In your community, Ryan and I are certainly available to answer questions about that. Ryan, is there anything else that you want, I guess, the average person to know about using these dashboards or how moving forward they'll start to change and look?
Yeah, I think we just want to stress this is a work in progress. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're zeroing in on those data points that are most relevant to understanding the health of the housing market. And we're going to need everybody's help to communicate this data to local decision makers, to developers and lenders and investors. We really want everybody to have a shared understanding of what's happening in the marketplace. And we want to keep updating this data to ensure that it's as accurate and timely as possible.
Awesome. Well, and thank you so much, Ryan. I think one thing I just wanted to point out too is that if you look at this for sale, housing number, it really does show that if you're a single wage earner, in our region, it would be really hard on average, to meet that need. And so what we're seeing, and there are some charts and examples on the website, is if you can look at what your occupation is and what you might make in that occupation, and if you can rent or own. And I think that does really help put it into perspective that while we know we have higher wage earners and lower wage earners, we really need a variety in type of housing for those across that income spectrum. And this slide to me really points that out, how most people would be priced out of being able to reach or obtain a for sale home in our region. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this data. Don't get too overwhelmed, but also know that, Ryan, maybe I'll just ask you, what is the likelihood that our region will reach that 1,000 number? Because I think a lot of people gasp when they hear that, and that is not necessarily what Bowen's saying, that you will actually build 31,000 units, but maybe a number to strive for.
Yeah, I mean, I think year over year, we want to try to strive for 10% of that number. And I think we want to get really good at planning for good growth in the community, in the places where it makes sense, where infrastructure exists, where property is available, where the land can handle additional development. All those things are going to be really important. And as the community grows, we want to make sure that we're also thinking about the other side, which is how are we preserving the places that are most important and having those conversations together so that Northern Michigan stays Northern Michigan and we can continue to accommodate a growing workforce.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. I think we'll wrap up for now and we'll dive in deeper, maybe and do a refresh when we get some more data and those numbers change. But again, just thank you for your time and we hope you all find this useful.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Yarrow.